in the middle of the night, I woke up because I heard this loud sound and this flash of red light in my room. And I was staying in a room that had absolutely no windows. So I have no idea what that was, but it did scare the shit out of me. So, yeah, that's what happened to me while we were out there.
Ladies and gentlemen, Binal of America!
You know, a lot of people out there think if they talk about it, that this thing is going to come back. And there are a lot of people that have kind of locked this away in their past, and they do not want to talk about it. It's like surviving a car crash. No one wants to really revisit that.
Wow. Is he doing okay now, or is he sort of just rocking?
He's in jail.
Oh, no.
He is, basically got arrested for stalking Ivanka Trump.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Binal of America Audio, with your host, Tim Binal.
What is going on, my friends? This is Tim Binal of BinalofAmerica.com with another edition of BOA Audio Season 6. Kicking off this summer with a big interview and get a ton more awesome conversations in line for you during the summer. Stay tuned to the end of the program for an update on those and a whole slew of BOA in-house notes. But we really want to get into the episode right away. Before I do that, of course, let's plug the man who provided the music for this episode, Pete Diggins. His website is aurophonic.com, www.aurophonic.com. Check out his stuff, and if you are a musician who is listening and you want to contribute a tune to BOA Audio, we're still looking for them. We are putting them in the back burner right now while we straighten out all the in-house stuff, but we're definitely going to get to them, I promise. So for those folks who have sent stuff in, sit tight, and for the folks who may still want to contribute something to the show, shoot us a line at boaaudio@hotmail.com. Now that we've taken care of that bit of business, let's get cooking on this installment of BOA Audio. We are kicking off our summer session by welcoming filmmakers Matthew J. Pawlowski and Anastasia Constantino for a conversation about their film Eyes of the Mothman. This movie really has created quite a buzz in the world of esoterica, and we're going to delve into a whole bunch of areas surrounding the film. Not just the content of the film, not just the Mothman mystery, which we will examine, of course, in great detail, but we'll also hear a number of bizarre stories from the making of the movie, as well as a whole bunch of weird stuff that happened to the folks who made Eyes of the Mothman after they finished filming the movie. Really creepy stuff in there. During the conversation, we go down a whole bunch of different side roads. You're going to hear about UFOs, MIBs, alien contact tales, and Ivanka Trump. That's a little of a wild card one we threw in there, but you're going to hear a crazy story involving Ivanka Trump. Altogether, really, it is a fun and informative look at one of esoterica's most enigmatic mysteries, the Mothman, with a pair of curious and talented outsiders who documented their investigation in a truly remarkable film, talking about Eyes of the Mothman. Given that this is a double guest episode and the BOA Audio audience has been waiting far too long for another installment of the program, we're going to skip the bios for Matthew J. Pawlowski and Anastasia Constantino. Of course, you can find those at Binal of America, and we definitely want to plug the website for the film, www.eyesofthemothman.com. Pretty simple, all one word, eyesofthemothman.com. Check it out. And with all that said, folks, let's get down to business and rock and roll. This interview was recorded on March 23rd, 2011. Matthew J. Pawlowski and Anastasia Constantino talking about the film Eyes of the Mothman and the Mothman Mythos on BOA Audio Season 6. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of BOA Audio Season 6. This week on the program, we're going to be exploring the Mothman mystery with two folks who are behind a recent film that just came out. It's getting a lot of buzz in the esoteric community, and I'm talking about the film Eyes of the Mothman. It's from Redline Studios, and with us here to discuss it is the writer, producer, and director, Matthew Pawlowski, and the executive producer, Anastasia Constantino. And we're going to be talking about the movie, how they ended up making the movie, some of the stuff that's in the movie, and some of the fallout from the movie, which is pretty intriguing as well. So welcome to the program, Matthew and Anastasia.
Thank you.
Hi.
It's good to be here.
And as I told these guys right before we started the show, I just finished the movie this afternoon. I really liked it quite a bit. It's really authoritative and long in a good way. It's packed with stuff, so I highly recommend folks pick it up, check it out for sure. Well, let's start with you, Matt. We'd like to, kind of kick off the interview with some bio background. Who are these people that we're bringing onto the show to talk to the folks out there? So, tell us about you and how you got interested in this story and how you ended up, stalking the Mothman, if you will.
Well, I've always kind of had a personal interest in the paranormal. I grew up in New Jersey in a very, very old house, and as a young kid, we'd see a lot of weird things, hear a lot of weird things, and it kind of piqued my interest. And so at an early age, I started researching the paranormal, writing about it. As I got into my early teens or late teens and early 20s, I started working as a freelance writer for different paranormal magazines. So it's something that's always kind of been interesting to me. As I became a professional filmmaker, at times I would look to kind of merge those two loves of the paranormal and filmmaking. So this is kind of one of those projects that have stemmed from that. I kind of, for years, would write about paranormal things, working on various magazines, and then one day I kind of stumbled across the story of the Mothman, and I was surprised that I'd never heard of this story with so many peculiar things that happened in one kind of close duration of time. So it made me kind of investigate further. I read the very popular book by John Keel, and after reading that, I thought that it would be the perfect kind of project to make in documentary form. Nice. And how about you, Anastasia? Now, you said before we did the interview, you sent me a little, background information, said you really kind of weren't really interested in the paranormal before you got mixed up in all this. So how did this all unfold for you?
Well, I didn't know anything about Mothman. Was not at all into paranormal. I like watching horror movies. That's about it. But then Matt kind of came to me and said, I'm really interested in doing this. It's about this town in West Virginia, and I asked him, what the story was. And when he started talking about it, I just thought the whole thing was really cool, and I looked into, the history of the town, and I thought just overall it was, something that I kind of wanted to work on, and I don't know, I got interested. It's mostly just through Matt, just from, him telling me about it. I'm not going to say he talked me into it, but just his enthusiasm about the whole thing just kind of made me, want to get on board.
Yeah, it was infectious, if you will, right?
Right.
There you go. So do you ended up kind of I wouldn't say become a believer, but you sort of gave it more credence, I guess you could say, as you went along making this movie with Matt?
Yeah, before we started production on the movie, we kind of went out there just to, look around, meet a few people that were involved. I didn't really have many expectations. Anytime you hear about people seeing, monsters and demons and stuff, you always think, okay, whatever. And then I was just like, all right, who are we going to meet out there in Point Pleasant, And then we went there, and just all these people that we started talking to just seemed so genuine, and, they just seemed like they really believed what they were saying. So it made me believe their stories. And none of them said, I saw this monster, and it was definitely a monster, and it was a demon. They just pretty much said, this is what I saw, this is what it looked like. I don't know what it was. Draw your own conclusion. And that's kind of, I think, what made me, I guess, believe them and just not just kind of push them aside and think, these people are crazy.
Yeah. Now, Matt, for the folks who are kind of just joining us here and they're only sort of vaguely know about the Mothman story or maybe even haven't heard about it before, why don't you just give us sort of a thumbnail look at, what the Mothman story is?
Sure. I think there's actually, if you ask anybody about the Mothman, you'll probably get either two versions of the story. The more kind of mainstream, the more popular thing that will be talked about right away when someone says Mothman is that for about a year's period of time in a small town in West Virginia by the name of Point Pleasant, people were witnessing what they described as almost an angel or a man with wings had red eyes. It was about 6 feet tall. And this thing wasn't kind of just like a flash in the forest or, people were seeing it at a great distance. This thing was an up-close and personal eyewitness accounts. This thing would chase people. It would chase cars. People were hunting it, looking for it. It was a kind of mass hysteria event in 1966, between 1966 and 67 in West Virginia. That's kind of the most direct kind of answer, I guess you could say, for people who are unfamiliar with the Mothman. It's similar to a Bigfoot sighting, but a little bit more spiritual and a little bit more kind of crosses over into different realms of, the paranormal or spirituality. There's a lot of people who don't know what this thing was, but it was a creature of some sort, best described, I guess, as a man with wings, red eyes. Mm-hmm. For anyone who kind of has researched the subject a little bit more, or who has kind of taken the time to kind of see what really kind of went on out there, Mothman is much more than the actual monster that was spotted. This town for decades has had kind of unusual phenomenon, tragedies and occurrences go on there, curses, fires, floods, just UFO sightings, men in black sightings, ghosts, haunted houses. Everything under the sun paranormal has kind of gone on in Point Pleasant at one time or the other, and a lot of people kind of group all of this together as kind of the collective story of Mothman. So Mothman kind of transcends just the event itself of the creature being spotted and kind of connects into a broader kind of history of this town in terms of the paranormal out there.
Yeah, it's like a window zone.
It is, yeah. So, there are a lot of people kind of, there's a bridge that fell in 1967 where 46 people were killed. And, there are many people that will say that's part of the Mothman story just because, it was kind of unusual circumstances. There are other people that will say it had nothing to do with it. But, I think for the more researcher, Mothman kind of means this collective events that have gone on there for years.
Right, exactly, yeah. Now, what I liked a lot about the film, too, was it just didn't sort of like throw you into the Mothman frenzy right away. It sort of set the stage a little bit with some more of the background about this town. Obviously, there's a lot of Native American stuff going on there, and we'll leave some. Obviously, we're not going to give away the whole movie here for you, but I wanted to touch on some of the areas that I thought were really interesting. The whole thing about the TNT factory was something that I'd never even heard of before, and I found that to be pretty amazing and makes you kind of wonder, if there's some kind of seed there that it involves itself in this whole thing in the long run, if you will. So I guess talk a little bit about that aspect that there was this TNT factory, and it was really kind of a secret base, if you will, for a while during the war.
Yes. There's, as I just mentioned, in terms of, Mothman being kind of the greater whole of these things, there are many little pockets of stories and events that have gone on here that, share a lot of strange coincidences. I mean, the first sighting, or one of the first sightings of the Mothman was at this TNT plant years later after it had been abandoned and kind of decommissioned. But during its heyday, this government facility, during World War II, it was the main manufacturing plant of all of the bombs that were used in World War II. So, aside from some of this weird paranormal history that this town has, it also has some definitive historical importance in the history of the United States with little things like this that you'll continually find. So here, this town in the middle of nowhere, that kind of no one's ever heard of, is this manufacturing plant where almost every bomb used in World War II or dropped in World War II came out of this place. And why that's kind of significant to the Mothman story is because there are a lot of people that felt that this government facility kind of did a little bit more than just manufacture bombs. There are rumors of kind of experimental testing that went on there, and then later on in the 80s, it was discovered that there was chemical leaks from this plant into a bird sanctuary to where mutations of animals were found, mutated fish. A lot of people thought there would be mutated birds out there. And then, of course, eventually when Mothman comes along, or when Mothman is sighted in the 60s, it's later on in the 80s when people discovered that there was contamination that people started to maybe piece together the possibility of, was this some kind of a mutated bird or animal, or was it some kind of, government engineered creature when kind of rumors started to leak out of possibly some government conspiracy stuff going on here, or a little bit of experimental testing going on at this plant.
And I was doing some research here on you guys before the interview, and I stumbled upon this article that said that you had recurring dreams of the TNT facility before you went down to Point Pleasant and discovered that's what you were dreaming about.
Yeah, there were some weird things that went on with us personally, all of the crew members that were involved with this project. But for me, that kind of quote comes from me where, just forever I've always had kind of a lot of reoccurring dreams, strange dreams. And as a kid, I would always dream about this weird kind of facility right on the banks of a really big river. Before this trip, I had never been to West Virginia or Ohio, so I had never been to that region before. And then, it didn't really hit me until after we had gone there. After we had done our preliminary filming, I had come back and I was doing some more research on the subject, and I was researching the Ohio River, which is kind of a lot of strange activity. It's always been circulated around that kind of landmark. And I came across this article, and I don't remember where it was from, but it was a psychological test to where basically it was a bunch of people in Japan that were having strange experiences, and they were dreaming about a river, and they were showing them rivers all around the world to try to identify which one it was, and everybody was identifying the Ohio River. So it was this article just about a study that was being done, that there are many people that actually dream about the Ohio River that don't realize they're dreaming about it, and then once they see the Ohio River, they realize that's the river for my dream. And as soon as I read that article, kind of just a light bulb went on in my head. I was like, oh my God, that's my dream. I have this dream. And then we had just gotten back from shooting, and I realized that this building that's always in my dream is the building we had just filmed. I didn't even realize it until after the fact.
Weird.
It was very strange.
What do you make of that, Anastasia?
Well, I didn't have any dreams, but while we were there, we did stay at the Lowe Hotel in Point Pleasant, which is a pretty well-known hotel. There's a lot of, I guess they say there's a lot of like paranormal activity and stuff that goes on there. But we did stay there, and in the middle of the night, I woke up because I heard this loud sound and this flash of red light in my room. And I was staying in a room that had absolutely no windows, so I have no idea what that was, but it did scare the shit out of me. So yeah, that's about that. That's what happened to me while we were out there.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys had some weird experiences making the movie and trying to get the movie made. It sounds like. How long did it take the movie to get done? Like 6 years or something like that?
It did, yeah. It took about 5 years, I want to say, and most of it just for reasons that were out of our hands. I mean, the filming of the program took about a month. Preparation took a few months. Research and such, but as soon as we were done with the program, I actually got very sick. I mean, I'm talking like the day we got back to New York, I got very ill, and I went to the doctor, and they thought that I had pneumonia, and literally for 8 months I was sick to where I couldn't work, couldn't leave the house, couldn't get out of bed. I mean, it was pretty bad. So I mean, 8 months right off the bat were gone just from me having a pneumonia, and it just got to be weird. And I'm you mentioned earlier about the cornstalk curse, which is the Native American curse that a lot of people kind of believe in out there. And at first glance, it's kind of, you think, oh, well, that's silly. But, when you're sitting at home after just filming a movie about curses and it hits like month 7 and the doctor tells you we have no idea why you're not getting better, those ideas of curses and things start to enter your mind, and you go, well, I wonder if there's anything to this. So, yeah, there was some of that. And then also just footage that we shot would get deleted off the hard drives. We lost the animation twice. Actually, we named every hard drive after portions of the film, and the cornstalk curse hard drive constantly would fail and cost us almost a year of time as well, because we lost all of the animation twice on that hard drive.
Oh man, that must be maddening, because I know how long it takes for the animation to do on those kind of projects.
Oh yeah, it was starting to drive us crazy, and we were starting to think if we're ever going to get this done. I mean, because when you're out there, there are people that say, there are people that warn you legitimately. They say, be careful with this stuff. We live out here. We see the effects of what goes on, and, you're playing with fire, and you kind of take it as a grain of salt when you're kind of first out there. But, you kind of change your perspective on things when a lot of weird stuff starts to happen. I think, like the Mothman story that we covered, what happens is, one coincidence is one thing, but then when you start to get into like 5, 10, 15 little weird coincidences and, you start to kind of associate them all together and you wonder, how many coincidences does it take to kind of make it a fact?
And when you went down there, I presume that it's sort of like a Roswell-esque, if you will, where this Mothman sort of dominates the mood of the town. Is that fairly accurate, would you say? I mean, is it sort of like that's their claim to fame nowadays?
I think so. Mothman is definitely, they have a Mothman museum, and there's just, it's pretty much everywhere. I mean, they sell merchandise in all the places and stuff. I mean, a lot of people definitely visit the town because of Mothman, and so they're I guess trying to make the most out of all the events that had happened. So yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Well, what's the mood like of the people in the town? Are they sort of like? Is it? I'm going to assume it's sort of like a cross section where some people are sort of like, "Yay, we're the Mothman town," and then other people are like, "Oh man, we don't want to be the Mothman town." Is it sort of like that?
I feel like it's kind of an age thing. Like the older people definitely have learned to embrace it. I guess the town gets a lot of tourists because of it, and so it helps. The Mothman definitely helps the economy of the town and stuff like that. But the younger people are just kind of like, get out of our town,
Oh, wow.
So I would think, I get the sense that it's more of like an age thing. Like the older people definitely have learned to deal with it, and the younger people are just kind of,
blasé.
Yeah. I guess pretty much like every other teenager in every other town.
Yeah, I would expect it almost to be the opposite, but I guess the older folks were there when it all went down, so they'll probably, remember it and everything. Now, yeah,
definitely.
So I presume
it's a mixed bag. It is a mixed bag. I mean, there were younger generations that we met out there too that were kind of a little more into it than others. I think it's about a 50-50. But I will say what they do advertise Mothman stuff, and it is kind of a little bit like Roswell. I have not been to Roswell, but I will say, like, in knowing people that have been out there, I would say the one difference, though, is that in Point Pleasant, what they've tried to do is kind of embrace it as just a weird history. Like, there's a lot of history to that area, going back to the American Revolution and even some of the things we talked about, the influence in World War II. There's a lot of rich history in that area. And I think what they've tried to do, though, is just not kind of pretend as if this didn't happen, because it was a very long period of time of unusual events. And I think it just took some time for people to kind of accept the fact that, that we should embrace all kinds of history, whether it's weird and wacky and unusual or not. And I think that's kind of become a little bit more mainstream now out there, to where, it's done in a little more respectful, I think, manner, that it's not really trying to convince anybody of anything, but just kind of embracing the collective history of the area, be it the legitimate kind of fact, historical things, and the a little bit more folklore, unusual stuff as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought it was, I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but at the end of the movie, one of the ladies, I didn't catch her name, but she sort of puts forward the idea that she believes that the government got it, that the government captured the Mothman somehow, and she wishes they would just tell us what it was or something like that. Is that a predominant opinion around there, or is that sort of rare? I mean, I'd never even heard that perspective from anybody that maybe the government actually captured the Mothman. So, I mean, talk a little bit about that if you heard that rumor at all.
I'd say it's not a widespread rumor, but, what I found interesting out there is, for every one person we interviewed for the film, there was probably at least 5 to 10 people that we met that were credible, that had interesting things to say, but refused to be interviewed, mostly out of fear. I mean, there was one person we spoke to who is an older gentleman, very nice guy. He kind of helped out with some of the archival research parts of the film. And one thing that he said to me, and very, very serious, very dead serious, and you could even tell he was still intimidated by it. But he said, I used to work at that facility, and not everything that they advertised that went on there. There was more to what meets the eye to that building. And he also went on to tell me that when he was working there, what he had always heard is that the same people that built that building were the same people that had built, the infamous Area 51. So in kind of these pockets. There are these little kind of, gossip that goes on. So that kind of story of, the kind of government conspiracy story was not as widespread, but in terms of the town, there were little chit-chats about that, and people who took it very serious, who approached us about it, but, would not come on camera and talk about it. And I think you also have to consider the fact that, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is very close to Point Pleasant, and that forever has been a long, stereotyped kind of government facility associated with conspiracy and extraterrestrials and unusual events, and that's only a stone's throw away from Point Pleasant and, the Ohio River. I also, one thing I do know about the Ohio River is that the government has used the Ohio River historically as a landmark for testing new aircraft, where if any, functions on an aircraft becomes disabled, you can always kind of use the Ohio River as a landmark to know your north and south and east and west. So I do know that the government has constantly used that area for testing of aircraft. So I think some of that also helps this part of the story of the government kind of conspiracy Mothman creature that kind of maybe got loose or was captured.
Interesting, yeah. Interesting. Very weird. Now, also here in these articles that I read about the making of the movie, it says you guys had some kind of encounter with some men who would fit the description of Men in Black. And it was both of you guys, Matt and Anastasia. So, Anastasia, I take you to be the more skeptical of the two. So why don't you tell us this story, and we'll get your take on what happened.
Okay, so I'm skeptical, but this was creepy. So I don't remember exactly because it was a while ago, but Matt and I were by the Ohio River. We were shooting something. I think we were time-lapse or something. I don't remember, but it just involved us setting up the camera and kind of just sitting there and just waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And there were these two guys who came up in a car. I don't remember what kind of car it was, but they drove up and they asked us, they were like asking just about the town, and they were asking about the Mothman. There's a Mothman statue in the town. They were asking about like the Mothman statue, and they were acting as if they had no idea why the town was popular and like why people knew about the town.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just kind of talking about it, but they just seemed strange. Like they were in the town. They mentioned that they were there for the Mothman, but then later on contradicted themselves and said that they didn't know why the town, like they didn't know anything about the Mothman. I don't know. Just the entire encounter was just really creepy and weird. And when they were talking to us, I just remember thinking, okay, I'm not going to tell them too much because this is just really weird. And then they drove away, and I just turned to Matt and I was like, do you sense anything about what just happened? And he's like, Men in Black. It was just like really, really strange. I wish I remembered it a lot better, but I just remembered being really creeped out by these two guys.
Maybe they erased your memory.
Maybe they did.
Yeah, it was unusual. We were filming the bridge for one of the bridge sequences, and we were filming on a dead end road, and a car pulled up behind us, and one of them said, what in the world would you want to film a bridge for? And it was just kind of a weird way of, you could tell that was just the way he said it. He was trying to get information of what we were doing. I mean, we kind of engaged them in conversation a little bit. I mean, we didn't really. I personally didn't think of them as like Men in Black until they had left, because I was just like, oh my God, like that was like a Man in Black encounter. Like, you hear so much about it, you talk to people about it, but we caught them in multiple lies. They would say, they were kind of just dressed weird. They were two people that didn't even seem like, if they were friends, it didn't seem like two people that would be friends with each other. They were kind of just extremely opposite people in a car in terms of personality type. And they were asking us tons of questions, why we were here, what were we doing here, why would we want to waste our time filming something so weird? And then they would say they were in town for the Mothman Festival, and then they would ask us what it is. And it was very contradictory and strange. And then I do also remember they said that they worked at a chemical plant like 30 miles north, and then 5 minutes later they said they were from St. Louis. So they would constantly contradict themselves, and it was weird. It was weird. I mean, it was kind of like I call a modern-day Man in Black type of sighting. It wasn't government agent suits with glasses, but it was two strange people that kind of came out of nowhere, asked a bunch of weird questions, a little too personal questions, wanted to know who we were, what we were doing, and why, and then, just odd behavior, and then they were just gone.
Weird. Jeez, that is really strange.
Yeah, instead of suits, they had khakis and polos on. I remember that for some reason.
Strange what stands out. Yeah, well, I thought that was interesting, too. You guys do a great job in the movie of sort of examining some of the other strange sort of fringe aspects of the Mothman story. Like a lot of people, like I said, I only sort of vaguely looked at the Mothman legend, if you will, and I didn't realize, first of all, how seriously rampant the UFO activity was compared to the Mothman sightings. I think somebody in the movie said it was like far and away more UFO sightings at the time than the Mothman sightings.
Yeah, a lot of people we spoke with said that, Mothman kind of gets all the headlines and attention just because of the strange nature of it. But, in the months to years before Mothman was spotted and afterward, there has always been a lot of UFO activity in that area. I mean, during the height of the Mothman sightings as well, there was probably the most frequent number of UFO sightings. I mean, we spoke to a lot of journalists and reporters from newspapers in that area at the time. I mean, it got to be the point where they set up a specific desk just for phone calls about UFOs that people would call in, just trying to find information of what was going on. I mean, it was kind of a constant barrage of sightings on a nightly basis for over a year's period of time. And all of them, not every one of them was, a kind of distant light in the sky. Some of these were, again, like the Mothman, up close, craft, daytime sightings, sightings on the road. It wasn't always just kind of your streak of light in the sky, what was that? It was a lot of mixed variety of aircraft and phenomena. And I think also that's where, some of the Mothman extraterrestrial kind of correlation comes from, because it wasn't just this weird monster in the woods. People would see a UFO fly over a wooded area and then minutes later spot the Mothman. So a lot of these connections started to be made just because they were all kind of being seen together. But it was very frequent, the UFO sightings.
Right. Yeah, you do seem to get that connection that a lot of people make, and that would explain it. It's not just like this was like a Bigfoot-like creature. It was like there was a lot of high strangeness going on around it at the same time, so people sort of lump it all together as one, if you will.
Yeah, I think what's important to note also about the UFO sightings, these sightings were reported from pretty reputable people. These were there were police officers. One major sighting was even from an ex-military from the Navy who worked on an aircraft carrier whose job was to kind of spot incoming aircraft by the naked eye and determine what it is. So you have people like that kind of reporting things. People that have legitimate training in spotting aircraft, reporting unusual things. And I think the other important kind of factor to kind of not leave out is that these are country folks. These are people that kind of I kind of grew up on a farm, and when you are from the country, you become used to weird things, in terms of natural things. So you kind of learn to identify shooting stars, swamp gas, aurora borealis, weird things like that are natural. And these people, were always kind of reporting things that were outside of the spectrum of what they understood to be normal. So, not everyone was an expert, but they were kind of keen on what a lot of UFOs kind of get misconstrued as, the natural phenomenon, the swamp gas, the shooting star, things like that. You've kind of got witnesses that kind of across the board, ex-military, hunters, people that spend time in the wilderness at night, reporting unusual activity. And I think that says something, to the fact that, there was something legitimately out of the ordinary kind of being witnessed in the skies in Point Pleasant during this time.
Now, obviously, this thing exploded like in 66 and into 67, and a lot of people obviously tied in with the bridge collapse in December of 67. Could you follow like a trend or a pattern with the Mothman sightings? Like, did they actually peak towards that when the bridge collapsed and then stop right afterwards? Because that's the sort of urban legend that people saw the Mothman for a year and then the bridge collapsed and then they never saw him again. What's the accurate portrayal of how it went down?
I'd say that is pretty accurate. From most of the research that we've done in terms of archives and what's available, if you look at the newspaper reports, there are newspaper reports on a daily basis of Mothman and UFOs, throughout the entire year of 66, leading into 67. And then as you get to December of 67, when the bridge falls, one would argue okay, did the bridge fall, and now kind of the focus of the media and the people, did that go on to the tragedy and the mourning of losing friends and loved ones, and is that why, this stuff stopped being reported, or did it legitimately stop, was it less frequent? I mean, that's something we'll never know, but for sure there is a track record and a trace of it that shows, people stopped reporting on this, people stopped seeing things, shortly after this tragedy happened. I mean, there were people that reported that they saw lights above the bridge, that they saw the Mothman on the bridge the day before. There's another report that people saw government-type people inspecting the bridge in the weeks before. But once that bridge falls and collapses, it's kind of like the case is kind of closed. Things disappear, people stop seeing things, and all of the paranormal activity dies down very abruptly, and it's just not there.
And we're talking like 45 years ago now. Has the Mothman showed up again in Point Pleasant at all in the ensuing 4.5 decades? Was ever another flap at all?
I don't think anything that can be considered seriously. I think that there's a lot of people that want to see something, that want to have an experience. There's been some hokey photographs taken and some YouTube videos up and stuff like that since then. But, I mean, there hasn't, in my opinion, been a legitimate case since 66 and 67. Since that time in Point Pleasant, there has not really been what I would call any legitimate sightings or any evidence of any sightings. Like I said, I think there are people that kind of want to see something and want to believe. There are a lot of people that are going to try to convince you they saw something. But, I don't think there's been anything reported to the legitimacy of what was going on in 66 and 67. I do know, it's not something that I'm currently up to speed on, but I do know, that obviously a lot of people will argue that, sightings of the Mothman or a giant bird or a thunderbird, as they call it, they kind of look at this thing as an omen of disaster. It's seen before something terrible happens. There are a lot of people that do believe that the Mothman or something of similar nature has been seen around the world and in other areas since then, and even before then, that can be compared to the Mothman. But it's kind of like a little bit of a disputed argument. Like, is it the same creature? Is it, the same type of thing? But, the idea of seeing a large bird or an omen of a thunderbird before something bad happens has kind of continued after these events in 66 and 67. So it's kind of a, if you want to consider those, maybe, but nothing in the Point Pleasant area that really has been legitimate, I would say.
Yeah, I know what you're speaking to. So it seems like it's sort of other people have picked up the Mothman meme, if you will, and sort of try to apply it to other disasters and things like that. But as far as we know, this Mothman thing was sort of like an isolated incident as far as this creature and the creature sightings and then the disaster.
Yeah, I mean, I feel, my personal opinion is whatever the creature they were seeing in West Virginia at that time, that specific entity, once it was left, is gone, and, anything spotted elsewhere, might be, kind of cut from the same cloth of this type of unusual creature or entity, but it's, the identical thing, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on this too, because it seems like it's an isolated incident of sorts. Now, what about this story of Injured Cold? I found this to be really amazing, and I had asked a friend about it after I saw the movie, and he'd heard of it, so it's not a completely unknown story, but I'd never heard of this before, so I guess share this tale of Injured Cold.
Well, Injured Cold, what's interesting is it's kind of a separate story of itself, but it does get associated with the Mothman just because of the time of its occurrence and the close proximity to Point Pleasant. These events took place predominantly in Parkersburg, West Virginia, which is a little bit of a bigger city than Point Pleasant. I want to say maybe 20 miles north or so, maybe even less than that. But what happened is around the same times of these sightings of UFOs, Mothman, all this weird stuff, it's kind of like just when you think things can't get any more bizarre, a guy from Parkersburg who's just an everyday kind of average guy, well respected in his community, basically publicly comes out and says that he had a very intimate encounter with an extraterrestrial entity whose spaceship stops his car or his truck on a highway one night as he's heading home, and he has a very full-fledged, up-close, impersonal encounter with an extraterrestrial being who calls himself Indrid Cold.
Yeah, very weird, very weird. And then this encounter, sort of this friendship, for lack of a better term, continues onward then over the next months or years or something like that, right?
That's true. Yeah, this was not like a one-time thing. This was a story that just continued to develop and get weirder and weirder. I mean, it was probably the only incident that I can think of reoccurring visitation of an entity that had a name, had a face, was recognizable. There were people that corroborated this man's story. His name is Woodrow Derenberger, the man who had these encounters, and he started. It was an ongoing thing to where he would have communication with this being called Indrid Cold. He would come to his house. He would visit his children. He went on rides in his spaceship. I mean, it just kind of kept getting, more elaborate as this story kind of unfolded to the public. But it was kind of an ongoing, like you said, maybe best way to describe it is a friendship between just an everyday guy from Parkersburg, West Virginia, and an extraterrestrial who called himself Indrid Cold. Very weird stuff down there in Point Pleasant. Now, just real quick, it sounds crazy too. Like, I mean, that to me was the most kind of not exaggerated, but that to me was the most fantasy type of story that we kind of covered in this. But the thing is, there's lots of documents and research that can corroborate the story. So it wasn't just like a guy making up stories and kind of, telling yarns around a campfire. This guy was being investigated by the United States Air Force. NASA invited him to their headquarters in Florida to speak to him in more detail about his encounters. So there were, this was something that was taken very, very serious. There's documentation of it. There are reports that were filed with the Air Force and with his family and non-disclosures and a lot of evidence that actually support his case, and even people that, again, would corroborate his wild stories. He would say, this thing flew over my truck on this day, it landed, this is what happened, and he'd have 10 people signing sworn affidavits corroborating his story. So that one kind of at first glance, it sounds like, just kind of crazy story, but there was actually a lot of people at that time that took it very serious, including the United States government. So when you kind of start to look at that story, you start, at first I think most people go, well, this is kind of wild. And then you start to look at all the evidence and you go, well, something must have been happening. There couldn't have been 300 people lying, from friends to country, bumpkin people to coworkers to Air Force officials. They couldn't have all been on it together lying. So there's got to be something to it because there is actually a lot of evidence with that case as well. Yeah. I found it really compelling. I wasn't I wasn't downplaying it. I thought it was pretty remarkable. I definitely will be looking more into the whole Indrid Cold story because it was so strange, but at the same time, more tenuous. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's more tangible than some of these other things because it seemed to go on for a while and have more to it in a way. So definitely an interesting tale there. Now, when you went down to Point Pleasant, was it hard to find people that had actually seen the Mothman? Because you do have people in the movie that had encounters with this creature. Was it like, are they well known down there as Mothman witnesses, or are they sort of like people you had to track down, through friends of friends type of thing? There's a little bit of both. There are some kind of like Mothman celebrity, quote unquote, people out there that are kind of, made a name for themselves in terms of being a part of the story. I mean, our main focus when one thing that we wanted to do was, we respected the John Keel book and the investigative nature of that book, but we did want to kind of separate ourselves from what had already been done before. So we were actually out to kind of look to interview a little bit more like scholarly people, professors, engineers, people that kind of had an outside relationship with this story, that could comment on it, that had a, some appropriate relationship to the story. But we were not trying to just find, every person who said they saw something. We did want to talk to some of the witnesses, but it wasn't our mission to kind of just have the film be told from just that standpoint.
Yeah.
We did interview a few people that had some very close encounters with the Mothman, and I honestly, it was surprising that we came across a lot of people that did witness this thing up close, but they would not talk to us, usually for several reasons. One, I would say would be fear. I mean, I remember at least 5 people, at least, that, someone would say, oh, you should talk to, so-and-so. They had an encounter with this thing back in '66, and, you would talk to them and be very respectful, and it didn't matter what you said. They were not going to tell you a word, not out of, fear of being ridiculed or fear of being misrepresented, but just fear that this thing was evil, that, a lot of people out there think if they talk about it, that this thing is going to come back. And there are a lot of people that have kind of locked this away in their past, and they do not want to talk about it. It's like a tragic event to them. It's like surviving a car crash, and no one wants to really revisit that. And there were a lot of people that we did meet, but that just, didn't want to talk to us, and, we were respectful of that, and we didn't really want to push it with them because it was a very emotional. I mean, half of them, even in telling us that they can't talk about it, would break down into tears.
Wow.
Yeah, and even when we approached them without the cameras, like initially we approached them without cameras just to, kind of get a feel for it and a feel for what they were going to say. And even without the cameras, they didn't want to talk to us. And some of them even whispered when they were talking about it. So it was definitely, in the back of their minds, I feel like, still, all the time.
And what do you attribute that to? The rumors of the whole curse aspect of it, or just that it was so bizarre and unsettling to them that they can't even bring themselves, like post-traumatic stress, like what Matt was saying?
I definitely think that they're just scared. They're just scared of it happening again. I think that a lot of these people still, don't know what it is that they saw, and they're just genuinely scared about the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. You have an encounter like that, and it probably flummoxes you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're bewildered by what you saw, and no one can really ever say. Now, what do they think of the movie that came out about their town and everything, and the experiences down there? What was the reaction to the film?
I think that they were all happy that we. I guess a lot of times when documentaries like these get made, it kind of paints the town or paints the people in a bad light. I think they were happy at the fact that we didn't do any of that. We just allowed them to tell their story. Brought in experts to tell us their scientific view of the whole thing, and just trying to allow people to just make their own conclusions, which is what the people of the town have tried to do. They just tell their story, and they want you to draw your own conclusion. They're not telling you what it is. They're not giving you a definitive answer. It's just, these are the facts, take what you will from it. So I think for the most part, I think everyone that saw it, definitely said that they're happy that that's what we did, and that, it was kind of an unbiased approach to the whole thing.
Yeah, it was definitely a fair and balanced, although that expression's been co-opted in an unfair way, but it's definitely a fair and balanced film for sure. Now, what about the Richard Gere movie, though? Are they fans of that, or are they kind of like, not really too happy with how that came out?
Yeah, they're not very happy with the Richard Gere movie. That was one of the first things we learned when we were out there, and that we went out there a year before we shot anything, just to kind of meet people, because, both Anastasia and I both come from backgrounds of working in the news and working on reality shows, and, a lot of times there's this attitude from big kind of New York or LA companies where it's just, hey, you have something, a weird story, tell us your whole life story, and, you don't know who we are, and then it's just kind of like this almost, just kind of a bad attitude, I think, that a lot of people that work in our industry do, that they just assume that people are going to want to divulge their entire life story to you, without even knowing who you are. When we first went out there, the reason we went out there was just to kind of meet people, let them know that we were kind of very down-to-earth people, that we were out to kind of tell a different kind of story on the Mothman. We weren't out there to kind of tell this glamorized, weird alien from outer space. You know, I remember one woman, the first week we were out there, you know, I told her who we were and what we were doing, and I just remember her going, no one's going to talk to you, you know, never going to happen. You know, like these people are sick of, you know, everyone who comes in here, you know, makes us look like idiots. And, you know, the Richard Gere movie always comes up. A lot of people, you know, kind of were just unhappy about that film in terms of the townspeople. But, you know, once we started telling them, once we started showing them some of the research we had done and some of our intentions, you know, when they saw that we were kind of, you know, we're talking about the murder of Chief Cornstalk, the importance of the Battle of Point Pleasant that took place there, some of the more historical aspects, and how we were basically out there to tell the collective history of this town, you know, from the weird stuff to the true stuff to the undeniable things that have happened there. That opened a lot of doors for us, and you know, what we looked to do was make a film that if you've heard about the Mothman, you've heard about any of these weird stories on Point Pleasant, or if you visit this area and you want to know a definitive kind of collective overall idea of what happened and what went on out there, you can basically watch our film and kind of know almost every detail. And people really kind of appreciated that approach, that we weren't out to do the quick, you know, Hollywood 30-minute movie. I mean, the film that we made is long, and it's exhaustive and informative, but it was for those intentions, to kind of leave no stone unturned with this story, and just tell the story that the people out there wanted to tell. You know, we took a lot of cues from them of, you know, what's important for them to talk about, what's important for them to represent in their town. And the film is really, you know, kind of a perspective told from the eyes of, you know, those who witnessed it. You know, no pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, you kind of get that across too in the part where you talk about how you know, the local scientists or scientists in the area suggested that it was a sand crane or some kind of crane that people were seeing, and it sounded like the town and the people who saw were kind of insulted that these outsiders had suggested that it was just merely some bird, and they were too stupid to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you had a lot of outside college professors, you know, from the outskirts. You know, Point Pleasant is kind of surrounded to a degree by, you got Marshall University, West Virginia University, Ohio State University, in pretty close proximity, but they are kind of on the outskirts of this town, Point Pleasant kind of being in the middle. And you had some college professors at the time saying, oh, these people are just seeing a sandhill crane, they don't know what it is. And, you know, they're basically telling that to a bunch of, you know, country people who hunt and fish and live in the woods and the mountains every day. And it's kind of, I think that's where most of the insult came from, where, you know, you're telling a bunch of people who are very connected to the earth, who are very connected to the environment, and they know the animals of their area and the geography of where they live. It's very much a part of who they are as people, and their heritage and their history. And, you know, you're kind of almost using a misunderstanding of that as an excuse of them not knowing. I think that's where most of that frustration and anger comes from, that, you know, you're trying to tell someone who's an expert in that field, you know, that they're misreading into something that they know very much about.
And having seen the movie, I was really surprised too by how you get you get the point across that it seems like these Men in Black appearances or encounters were much more prevalent than I had originally thought. So I guess tell us a little bit more about how extensive these, you know, appearances by the Men in Black were during the big flap.
Yeah, I think, you know, they just like the UFOs, just like Mothman, you know, what started happening is, you know, this town, even today, when we went out there 5 years ago, there's maybe 3,000 people in the town, which is not a large number, but it's not a small number either. But it's the kind of community where, you know, it sounds like a cliche, but everybody knows everybody. You know, the first week we were there, we would travel up to Ohio State University to interview some professors there about the documentary, and we would come back, and when we would come back to the hotel owner would say, oh, how is Ohio State University? And we would say, like, how did you know we were there? And, like, people just knew like where we were, what we were doing every day. We didn't tell anybody, but this town is very close-knit. So, we were the outsiders there 5 years ago filming, and everybody knew where we were, what we were doing, because it's a small community. And so what happened was, back in 66 and 67, when people started spotting men in black, it wasn't just that they were spotting these government people. It's just that there were these outsiders that were in their town that did not fit, didn't dress like people from out there dressed, didn't talk, didn't act like them. So, I think people were very perceptive out there, when there's something off in their community. So there was a lot of people kind of walking around out there and kind of, showing up on people's doorsteps, taking reports of these UFOs and weird things that people knew, were just not from this immediate area. I mean, one specific, I'd say, key element is there was a reporter in the area named Mary Heyer at the time, and she was a very well-respected individual in the community. She was kind of a shoulder to lean on for people. These are very sincere, salt of the earth, like genuine American type people, people that are very honest, very hardworking type people. And when these weird things started happening, they were not stupid, they're not crazy. Their immediate reaction was just fear of like, I don't understand what's going on. There's strange things that are going on out here, and it brings fear because it's fear of the unknown. So a lot of the people in the community at the time would go to Mary Heyer to kind of lean on. Looked to, she was a reporter. She kind of traveled a little bit more outside of the area, kind of handled a lot of different subjects as a journalist, and I think they used her as a means to kind of to go to kind of to express their concern about these things, and she kind of became this person to go to. And also, what you'll find is, it started with kind of Mothman. People would go to her, explain, these weird sightings of a Mothman. Then it became the UFOs, and then when the Men in Black started coming around town, a lot of people were reporting to Mary Heyer these strange kind of intrusions of privacy in their home or on the roadway or in public places by what you would call the Men in Black.
Yeah, and she even had her own weird encounter, which was strange because it's like, you go from being sort of the documentarian of it, her, to being an experiencer of the strangeness. And it was like this. I was of the thought that maybe these were like government agents, but the more I saw in the movie, it seemed more and more like something else, something even weirder was going on with these guys. I don't know. Very perplexing. The Men in Black.
It's true because what would happen is, I mean, and when you talk about it, sometimes it sounds hokey or goofy, but it's just like. Each of these little things would top one over the other, like seeing a light in the woods is weird. Seeing a flying man is weird. Seeing Men in Black, like these things continually would top each other in terms of weirdness. I mean, even as you mentioned about Mary Heyer, her experience with the Men in Black was not even your prototypical, government agent type guys in suits approaching her. She used to work out of the county courthouse in Point Pleasant. And, this is probably months into it now of hearing stories of Men in Black, UFOs, and not really having any personal experiences herself. I do believe that she had several occurrences where she did witness UFOs before this, but, nothing with the Men in Black. And what happens to her is one night, late at night, as she's working in her office, I don't even know how to describe it, but I guess a miniature Man in Black, a 4-foot man walks into her office in a suit. He looks like he's wearing a wig or he's, just something strange about him. Comes in, asks her a bunch of weird questions about the unusual activity in the area, asks her directions to a nearby city, and then before she can even answer, the guy grabs a pen off her desk and screams crazy wildly and runs out of her office. And that's kind of her own weird encounter with this thing. And it just sounds ridiculous, but, like, these things happen, and they're being reported by, this woman who, at the time, is probably one of the most respected, well-to-do individuals in the area. And even herself, has these events happen to her that are almost embarrassing to talk about.
Yeah. It was really weird. It was one of the more compelling aspects of the film, so I highly recommend that part of the movie.
You're listening to Banal of America Audio.
I noticed you guys didn't get into sort of the whole thing with John Keel and how he wrote the book and how it sort of thrust this thing into sort of like a national spotlight, if you will. Is that a purposeful sort of thing, not to get into sort of the pop culture phenomena that it became later?
Say that again?
Well, I noticed you never mentioned John Keel or anything in the book, and in the movie, and he's sort of the one who made the whole story pretty famous and everything. Is that?
Yes. Yeah, it was intentional. It was because, there hasn't been much coverage of this story. I mean, when you look at books and films that have been done on this, you've got John Keel's kind of authoritative, Bible on the incidents, the Mothman prophecies, which I believe was published in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Mothman prophecies, the narrative film, which I have to say I enjoyed as a film. We were talking earlier about so many people not liking it. I'm a filmmaker who makes narrative films and documentary films. It is not the easiest thing to take a subject such as this, turn it into a narrative, and keep all of these true elements. It's just the demands of what Hollywood studios expect and things like that. It's very hard. So I actually have to say I really enjoyed the Mothman Prophecies film for what it was. But there's that film, there's John Keel's book, and then there's a few other books out there. Jeff Wamsley, who we interviewed in our documentary, has a few books out there. Chad Lambert is another author who's covered the Mothman a bit, but there's not a whole lot of material out there on Mothman. And when you mention Mothman, everyone always immediately associates John Keel with it. And even though, he is kind of the authoritative, first person to kind of break this story, globally, and kind of in a mainstream way, we wanted to do something that was just a little bit different, a little bit, separated from that story. Obviously, we did pull from elements of his research and things like that, but we wanted to kind of identify ourselves as a separate type of film. And most people actually have responded pretty well to that because, even though there's not a lot of content, John Keel kind of covered most of what there was to be covered in his book. So a lot of people have kind of reached out to us and just said, hey, your documentary was really not what we expected, but that was like in a really good way, because it kind of has a different approach than what's already been done. A lot of what's done, I think, Sci-Fi Channel and I think A&E have done some other coverage on Mothman, and it's been lately it's been kind of more commercialized, more horror movie, mainstream, getting further and further away from the facts. And ours was, meant to not really be a mainstream entertainment, quote-unquote, type of film. It was meant to be a very investigative look at this subject in a very earthbound, serious way. So it was kind of, we were trying to separate ourselves from him to a degree as our own thing, but also not 100%,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't sort of, it wasn't in a pejorative way.
Yeah, of course.
What's the sort of like, I still have a hard time because I was laughing about this. The original like drawing of the Mothman that's like so famous is like a snowman with wings. It's just like this round thing that doesn't even like it's like a blob. So what do people actually describe this thing as? Because there's very few witness drawings that I've ever seen, except for as I said, the snowman with wings.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's always described as a man with wings, but the interesting kind of detail that often kind of doesn't get left out, but like when you kind of just describe Mothman in passing, it's always man with wings. And of course, when you think of a man, you think of a face and a head. But when you get into the detail of Mothman, one of the things that was a reoccurring kind of description from eyewitnesses and from different testimonies is that people could always describe its height, they could describe its color, they could describe the color of the eyes, which is always a deep burning red, but nobody could ever describe its face. So one thing that has kind of lingered is that just this kind of, misunderstood or just kind of, it's a confusing, kind of baffling way to explain it. But even when you talk to witnesses, they describe it as a man, but they can't describe the face. So like people are unsure, like, if it even has a face, if it's just these two eyes resting above shoulders, or if they're hovering there, or if they're on a fixed kind of surface there. Like people cannot describe the face or remember a face And again, it's kind of like some of the things we've been talking about. It sounds foolish or it sounds silly or hokey, but you just can't. It's like a headless type of thing, but it has eyes. So it's one of those things where you can describe it, but you contradict yourself in describing it by describing it. So it's very weird.
Yeah. It's odd because you wonder what it is, and you try to put your mind to it, but it's so hard to really wrap your mind around because all you really ever hear is, like you said, man with wings, and it's like, I wish there were more witness drawings of it, but
you know what's weird is I haven't told many people this, but after we did this again, you kind of like you learn more and more facts and things even after the film is done. And I remember it was either reading something or talking to someone about other people. I remember someone asked me, I think they said, well, have you ever had any type of encounter that you would compare to like these people that they've described with the Mothman? And I said no. My immediate reaction was no. And then like for some reason something kind of popped into my brain, almost kind of like a lost memory or kind of a faded memory from like a long, long time ago. And it's weird as I kind of searched my thoughts and I'm like, wait, something, I say no, but something kind of sticks out in my head of like having some kind of weird experience. And I did kind of recall this kind of vague memory I had of being very young. And as I mentioned, I kind of grew up on a farm, and I had this memory of actually witnessing something pretty similar to how people describe the Mothman. I remember as a kid being in in the woods, and this giant winged thing landing in a tree right next to me. And at the time, I thought it was an owl or some kind of bird, but I won't even say what it was or put a label on it, but I do have this weird, vague memory of a massive bird landing next to me in this cherry tree on this kind of farm I grew up on. And I remember being terrified of it. It scared the hell out of me because it kind of made this big flapping noise, and it stirred up all of the leaves right next to me. And I remember running to tell my father about it, and I remember telling him that he said, what did it look like? And I said it was brown, it had wings, it was really big. And I remember describing it as not having a head. I remember that. And when I kind of recalled this memory not too long ago, I was like, am I making this up or what? So the next time I visited my father, I said, do you have any memory of me seeing some weird bird when I was a kid? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I remember you running to the house, saying that you just saw a massive bird, but it didn't have a head. And I was like, okay. So it kind of validated this weird memory I have. And it's a weird thing to talk about, but, in remembering that I kind of had that little incident, it kind of not brought validity, but it kind of just made me understand a little bit that, like, maybe what these people are seeing or describing is not so, science fiction, because I had something that would fall kind of under the same parameters, and, I saw it, I was there, and it was weird and just not describable, but it doesn't make it hokey, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it makes total sense. And what I thought was interesting, too, that I picked up from watching the film was that a lot of these people, beyond the traumatic emotional effects from seeing this creature, was some odd physical, maladies that befell them after they witnessed the creature, which I thought was really interesting. And maybe, if we're ever going to get to the bottom of these mysteries, we need to sort of understand some of these clues and stuff. So, what kind of weird stuff happened to these people physically? Sound like sunburn and weird eye ailments and stuff?
Yeah, some of them got, I guess, pink eye, sunburns, just like weird rashes on their skin and stuff like that after they saw the Mothman, which is also why a lot of like scientists and stuff say that it might have been something having like radioactive, something with radioactive whatever, that's what they saw. That it was some sort of mutated bird. I think that's why they started saying that it was a mutated bird and that it carried radioactive waves or something. I don't know. Something with radioactivity, and that's why they had all these skin rashes and burns and stuff like that. I think that's where that came about.
Yeah, there are some people that kind of believe that kind of lends credence to, the theory that it was a mutated bird or chemically enhanced or had something to do with the chemical spills. The fact that people were having physical and physiological reactions to Mothman encounters, their eyes would swell up pink, they would have rashes or burns. There are some people that say that that's evidence of, coming in close proximity to something that's been mutated or chemically enhanced. There's a lot of biologists we talked to for the film that said, if you came into close contact with the kind of chemicals that were spilled in that area, these are the reactions you would have, and they're the same kind of physical reactions that Mothman witnesses had.
Weird. Yeah. I do feel like there's some kind of connection there with this TNT thing, but I'm not sure what exactly it might be. Because you wonder.
What's difficult. Yeah, that's what's difficult when you kind of look to investigate this story. I think anytime someone goes to write a book or do a film on this subject, you kind of have it in you that you say, all right, I'm going to solve this mystery and figure it out. And what happens is you find all this evidence, and there's all these connections and correlations, but there's never like that final one. There's always these little pieces of, little information that you can link Mothman to Cornstalk to Thunderbirds to Indian curses, but then you're missing like the final piece. Or you can link Mothman to the TNT plant and the TNT plant to chemical spills and government conspiracy and, the reaction of witnesses to the chemical kind of influence that would be expected from that type of interaction, which is a lot, but then you're missing one more thing to just kind of, make it definitive and final. So that's what's frustrating with this story, is that there are a lot of, plausible explanations that you can kind of substantiate with research and facts, but, there's multiples of them. It's not just the one. It's not just the chemical spill bird sanctuary thing. There's multiple kind of avenues that this could have all derived from, and it kind of spins you around in circles a bit.
Right. What I find really particularly compelling, too, about the Mothman mystery, and probably why it has such resonance with a lot of people in the paranormal community, too, is that it really doesn't fit into any box or perceived genre, I guess you could say, in the paranormal. I mean, I've talked to people in the crypto-terrestrial field, the cryptozoological field, and they really don't accept Mothman as sort of like part of the menagerie of crypto beasts, if you will. There's Bigfoot, and there's, some of the other strange creatures that they're sort of in the cryptozoological realm. But they always sort of keep Mothman off to the side, like that it's a supernatural thing. It's a paranormal thing that's not a flesh and blood creature. It seems to be that's the point of view of a lot of people. Then even the people in the UFO community don't embrace Mothman. It's sort of like it stands on its own as a sole, entity without its own genre.
I totally agree, and it really does. It almost becomes its own genre because it's like a cross-platform of so many things. It's curses, it's hauntings, it's it's psychological, it's physical, it's paranormal, it's spiritual. It crosses so many lines. I know for me that's why I was kind of drawn to this because, being someone who's always been interested in the paranormal, my view of the paranormal is that, it's really just an extension of the world that we live in. It's just it's part of the unseen world. All of these things are connected, spirituality, paranormal activity, all of these kind of subjects that people categorize things in. I do believe they are all a part of one big kind of universal thing. But I would have to say, though, in terms of the cryptozoological definition of it, I do agree that you really can't put it into cryptozoology. When I think of cryptozoology, I think of animals that are supposed to be extinct or not have been discovered yet. Things like Bigfoot, they're physiological creatures with DNA and with evidence. They leave behind footprints and they leave behind hair samples. And you look at the chupacabras, it leaves behind dead victims. Those are all things that I associate to cryptozoology. And Mothman, I would leave him out of that because to me it is more something of just of a metaphysical, of a spiritual, of a paranormal world where I don't think this is some missing link creature or bird. I mean, it has been theorized that it could be some type of pterodactyl type thing. There are a lot of people that describe the Mothman also as looking very much like a pterodactyl or a pterosaur. So there is that approach to it, that some people do think maybe it is related in terms of some kind of lost animal. But for most of the people I spoke to, this was something much different. I think when you see something, even if it's unusual, obviously if you see something that's a Bigfoot, you're going to be scared and terrified of it, but you're still, I feel like, going to have some kind of reaction of knowing that this is like a flesh and blood animal. Most people that saw Mothman did not view it as like a flesh and blood animal. It was kind of larger than that. It was like seeing a demon. It was like seeing an angel. So it kind of, I think that's one of the big reasons why it cannot be categorized like that.
Well, you raise an interesting question there, and that's, with the Bigfoot and everything else, with some of these other mystery creatures, we do have hair samples or footprint samples or scat samples. I mean, do we have anything with regards to the Mothman as far as physical evidence, whether it's tracks or scratches or anything of that nature?
I don't think so. Not really. I mean, there's been some things out there, like nothing I think that's credible or substantial or that kind of holds true. There are some people that will say they've, hey, I took a picture out my window and look at that shadow is the Mothman, and anytime those people start to kind of enter the discussion, and they're like, no, that's definitely a Mothman. It's like, all right, well, you have a picture of maybe something, but they're very inclined to identify it as this thing, I guess, because no one has. So there are some people that will try to say that there is some evidence out there, but I haven't come across anything that I would hold as a substantial, legitimate piece of evidence. I mean, a lot of people actually, mainstream people that have seen the film have asked that quite a bit. Why is there no evidence? They actually have asked why we haven't included any evidence in the film other than kind of, hearsay or personal encounter. And really, when it comes to this story, there really isn't any. There isn't much that kind of lends any credence or that are, legitimate pieces of evidence that we could have included. You look at the time frame, it's 1966, 67. I mean, we've gotten some kind of ridiculous questions of like, why didn't anyone take pictures of this? And it's like, all right, well, you're asking why no one took a picture of a flying demon in 1966 in the middle of the woods of West Virginia. Like, one, the time period, there's not a lot of, cameras that are just kind of, there's not a lot of people, in my estimation, just running around with cameras in the woods looking for a Mothman, at the time. And even in terms of, if you look at camera optics at the time and flash photography not even being that prominent, it's you're asking for something that almost that can't be achieved, I would say. So really all you have to work with is really eyewitness testimony and kind of secondhand tellings of the story. But, that's something, in my opinion, is to not, a lot of people will say, oh, well, eyewitness testimony is nothing. But, it's different when you're going to actually sit down with one of these people. These aren't actors. These aren't trained professionals. The people that we sat down with that said they had witnessed this creature, the fact that they're sitting there and you can kind of look into their eyes and kind of make an instinctive judgment on them. Everyone we came across that I met, I didn't get the impression anyone was lying to us. Like I said, there were people that were breaking down, crying, talking about it. So I can't say what they saw, but I feel like the people that did witness it, that we talked to, they believed that what they saw was this unnatural, dangerous creature. Like, I didn't get the impression that people were, pulling our leg or perpetuating a myth. And to me, that is an important piece of evidence. I think, the personal story, the personal connection, that kind of retelling of the encounter is a viable means of evidence, in my opinion.
Now, did the people who had encounters with the Mothman that you spoke to or that you read about, did they give the impression that it was sort of a sentient entity or more of an animalistic creature?
It was a little bit mixed. I'd say on the whole, most of the people that I saw or that I spoke to that saw it kind of put it in the category of, I'm not going to say like angelic in terms of, being completely of God or spirituality, but they put it on that level of just a higher power, a higher being type of thing.
Yeah.
Not something that was a wild animal for the most part. The one witness we did talk to, she didn't kind of describe it in that way, but her interaction with it was very kind of primordial in that, this thing climbed up on her car, left scratches on her car, was screaming, freaking out, kind of like almost rabid, vicious, kind of as you would think of like an animal attacking. The one woman that we did interview, her encounter with it was kind of barbaric and primordial, but most of the others were very much of a higher power type of feeling. That's
eerie. So that would be creepier, I think, than running into an animal of some sort.
Yeah, because you can kill an animal, but I don't know if you can. I don't know what you do with a demon or an angel.
That's true. No, I hesitate to ask, but having done the research here on the movie before the interview, this has come up in a couple of articles, so I got to ask you about your assistant cameraman and his mental breakdown and the whole Ivanka Trump thing. I've seen Ivanka Trump. I mean, I can't blame this guy. She's gorgeous.
Yes, for those who are not familiar with the story, what happened is, every crew member, like we mentioned earlier, did have some kind of weird reaction. I mean, I got sick. We lost hard drives. Anastasia kind of witnessed weird things in her hotel room while we were out there. I even got pink eye in both eyes the week that our movie got released, which is weird. But probably the weirdest thing to have happened to any of the crew members is Justin Mazler, who is a good friend of mine and a very good guy, great guy. I've known him for years. Shortly after the film finished, he did suffer a very severe, I guess what you would call a mental breakdown. It was difficult. I mean, we laugh about it because it is kind of kooky and weird, but he is and was a close friend of ours, and we worked with him all the time. And for outsiders, people will think there's been people, or Justin, basically got arrested for stalking Ivanka Trump, and then when that happened, he posted a YouTube video saying that he thought there was extraterrestrial involvement, and a lot of people have asked about this. So, what I can say about it is that, it's not fake, it's not a joke. Justin is a very real person. He's a very serious person. He's an artist. He's a cameraman. He worked on our film. And before the stuff came out publicly about the Ivanka Trump thing and about the paranormal involvement stuff, before any of that became public, for years, Justin has kind of spoken to me and kind of, confessed to me to a degree that, he, after this film was done, he did feel like there was some type of higher power, extraterrestrial type of influence going on in his life, to where he was, he would, a very good friend to him, so he kind of, trusted me. I was someone he can kind of come to talk to, and he was very serious about this. For the last 5 years since we shot this, when we finished filming, he has for a long time felt a weird influence from some type of power or entity. I mean, the only way he can really describe it was kind of like the Woodrow Derenberger case, like the Indrid Cold case, where it sounds crazy, it sounds wacky, of extraterrestrial type of involvement, but, he hasn't kind of gone into specifics with me with it, but he has made me aware of, what he describes as a serious concern for some type of paranormal behavior that's been kind of plaguing his life since we shot this film.
Wow. Is he doing okay now, or is he sort of just riding?
No, he's in jail.
Oh, no.
He is, the weirdest thing that he did was he basically got arrested for stalking Ivanka Trump, and one of the motives that came out kind of in court as to why he did this was that, an extraterrestrial presence influenced him to do this or guided him to do this. And like I said, it sounds crazy, it sounds ridiculous, it sounds, like we could have made this up out of thin air, but it's a very serious thing. I mean, it's serious enough to where he might do, jail time for this, and he has stuck to his story, and he has not kind of broken the story of what he's been saying for the last 5 years, that there's just been some weird mind control, alien stuff going on in his life. I honestly, we used to be much closer friends because he was lived in this area back when we shot the film, but after we finished that film, he's moved around quite a bit, so we're not, as available to be around him as much anymore. But we have kind of kept in contact to him to a degree, just as a friend. But he has struggled with this for years now, and it's definitely serious. And we just hope things get better for him, and that the whole kind of thing goes away. But we do know that he attributes a lot of the weird stuff that has gone on in his life and kind of the tragedy, and there's been a lot of kind of ups and downs in that guy's life, and he does kind of attribute it back to the working on this film. I mean, before this film, he was doing okay, and it was as soon as we got back, this was kind of just a new turn in his life that happened. So.
Yeah, once it sounds like it's not a publicity stunt, because once you end up in jail, that's usually when you fess up that it's a publicity stunt. So. Yeah,
there have been people that have wondered. It is frustrating on our end too that. There's been some people that are like, hey, is this a publicity stunt for your movie? And, the last thing we're trying to do is, our whole approach to doing this film was to have it be the most grounded, investigative, journalistic approach to these weird subjects. So the last thing we're trying to do is kind of like call attention in a weird, bizarre way to our film, because it's anything but that. I mean, anyone who kind of watches our film looking, for like a horror movie or for a sci-fi film, it's going to be disappointed, because it is very much a documentary from a journalistic, investigative approach. So, this whole kind of weirdness that's been circulating around it, it's weird. It's hard for us to react to it because we are personally attached to it. Like I said, Justin is and was a very good friend of ours. It's confusing because we don't know what's going on with him. But like I said, I will say that before this kind of became public, I was aware of his understanding and concern that what was going on in his life was related to the paranormal things that kind of went on in this film, and his involvement with the movie. It just didn't become public for years, basically. I mean, he's been struggling with this for a while. It only became public, unfortunately, at the similar time that the film got released.
Yeah, well, I wish him the best, so hopefully things turn out all right for him. You don't want to mess with those Trumps. They're strange people.
Yeah, I know. It is. It's bizarre. And what's weird is it's just another chapter of just bizarre, weird things that happen. When you involve yourself, I think, with this movie, we have witnessed them firsthand. I've just had bizarre things happen ever since this film, since we decided to do this movie. And, so I'm not surprised that Justin has gone through this. There are obviously ridiculously extreme levels of, call it paranoia or, paranormal kind of intrusion. But I can't speak too much about it because I don't know. I haven't talked to him. Like I said, the only thing I could say is that I was well aware of his opinion of, this being some type of, he went through a lot of struggles since the film. He attributed it to the kind of work on the film, and then only, recently has it become more kind of public nature just because of his problem involving the Trumps. That kind of, it's became a little more mainstream, I guess. But yeah, a lot of people have been asking about it, so it's,
All right, well, I don't feel so bad about it. Now, I'm going to feel bad asking about these two cats that were in the film, but they kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. Where'd you find the Frick brothers?
Stacy, you can answer.
Oh, my God.
Anastasia actually used to date both of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Both.
At the same time.
I'm sure they're very nice people, but I don't know, something. That one on the left, he kept sort of like looking up over the camera, and it was like, just look down, Mr. Frick.
They're interesting.
Are you going to be able to gather your composure and answer this, or what?
Yeah.
Well, we met them when we went out there the year before we started shooting. They were, I think when we went out there, the Mothman Festival was going on. So they were kind of dressed as the Men in Black when we met them. So we just started talking to them just because they were these two guys that were dressed like the Men in Black. But then they actually had a lot of information for us, and they knew a lot about Mothman and about just like, the other incidents that had happened in the town. So they're kind of paranormal investigators, if you will. They research a lot of different paranormal activities and stuff like that, and so we just thought that it would be a good idea to interview them and just kind of get their input on the whole thing.
All right, we'll leave it.
Yeah, they're unusual guys. They're brothers that are they're interesting guys. When we went out there, what happened was, we would say, hey, we're looking for, anyone who knows a lot about Mothman or this and that, and everyone would say, you got to talk to the Frick brothers. Have you talked to the Frick brothers? Do you know the Frick brothers? So we kept hearing about these Frick brothers, but didn't know who or what they were, and then they are actually, they're like a walking dictionary of Mothman information. I mean, a lot of the even some of the facts and research and things that are explored in the documentary, came from their assistance of their years of research. I mean, they've done a lot of legwork in this subject, and I think it's just a story that they are fascinated with. They're two paranormal investigators from Maryland, and they're very much kind of a part of the Mothman story and, immersed in it. So, we were trying to cover all angles of the story, the weird, the credible, the true, the educated, the professional, the whatever. So they kind of just fit into another viewpoint of the Mothman and someone who can basically speak of its occurrences.
Yeah, there you go. I wasn't meaning to besmirch them. They just were... They just seem like they came straight out of Central Casting or something. They
definitely stand out. Everybody always wants to know who the Frick brothers are. I mean, we're thinking about doing a whole Frick brothers TV show or something for VH1, maybe.
Just make sure he knows where the camera is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to sort of like wrap the whole thing up. At the end of the day, what do you think really happened there in 66 and 67? I mean, you've done an extensive amount of research into this. You made an amazing film on it. I mean, what's your, opinion on what actually happened there in Point Pleasant, West Virginia back during the Mothman flap?
Well, it's funny. I mean, this is, it'll sound like a cliche, and this is kind of the hardest part where, you've done years of research. You've made a film that's, where we set out to kind of make the most thoroughly investigative look at this subject, so everyone always wants to know, like, all right, you've done all this research, you've done all this work, like, what, is your answer? Like, what is it? What was it? And it's the most frustrating thing in the world because it's so hard to really put your finger on one thing. I mean, I know, for me, you look at the few different possibilities. Is it a mutated bird? Is it some type of extraterrestrial entity? Is it government related? One thing, when I used to work as a more active kind of journalist working and writing on the paranormal, one kind of inside person that I always used to kind of use for information and things like that, he used to always say to me that, anytime the government is involved or anytime the government is even like, within arm's distance of a story, you can always pretty much assume or blame them that they are the ones probably responsible. So, for me, going through the research, I do think that there's too many correlations and connections to the fact that you've got a secret government base, with rumors of a drift of weird things going on there. You have it kind of on a bird sanctuary to where chemicals leak, into the environment that are hazardous, that can mutate people and animals. And you've got people saying that the base was structured and built by the same people who built Area 51. I mean, to me, that always kind of stood out as the more, not feasible or realistic, but just having the most credence of connecting kind of storylines and pieces. The fact that you've got chemical influence, the government, the fact that the creature was spotted predominantly in the area of the TNT plant, I think that kind of says something. Honestly, in all the research I've done, there's nothing that, leads me to definitively put a label on it or say Mothman was definitely this or that. But I do feel like that story, those kind of connections, the government, the building, the mutations, the chemical spills, has to kind of, for me, ring the most true in terms of a possible scenario of what could have created this whole thing.
And what about you, Anastasia? Because you come into this, with less of a background in the paranormal. Matt's clearly, been knee deep in this paranormal scene for a while. You're sort of the outsider to this. What do you think happened down there?
Well, I mean, I can't say for sure what happened down there. I know that these people saw something, and I know that they believe that they saw something that, was something that might have been paranormal. But I don't know. I mean, there's way too many coincidences for me to just kind of put it aside and say, these people are crazy. So I definitely think that they saw something. Was it a mutated bird? Was it a demon? Was it an angel? I have no idea, but I definitely believe them when they say that they saw something.
Yeah. Now, Matt, what do you think of the whole idea that this is somehow connected to the bridge collapse? Because, quite frankly, I'm very skeptical of that. And even though I host a paranormal show, I definitely fall into the realm of, cynical paranormal enthusiasts. And to me, I feel like I feel like they're completely unrelated. I feel like the bridge collapsed, and people need to put order into chaos. So in their minds, it somehow connects that this creature was there, and then the disaster happened. But I mean, you've obviously looked at this extensively. So what do you think the connection between the two events really is?
It is hard to say, and it's kind of like you go back and forth. Like the skeptic in you kind of disproves it, and then the kind of journalist investigator in you kind of gives it, maybe there's something to it. I mean, I think, personally, I kind of would have to agree more on your viewpoint that it is a separate incident. I think that bridge would have fallen regardless, in terms of the investigation that went on, in terms of the engineering malfunctions that were discovered, that it was probably pretty grounded in reality of why that thing went down. You can't shove aside the fact that, there are people that we talked to that, saw people on the bridge, government people on the bridge. I mean, there was a lot of talk that people heard an explosion before the bridge went off, so there are some people that believe that there was some type of detonation, or that there was some type of, people heard an explosion before that bridge had fallen.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that's where it gets really clouded to where, people mix in the myths and the legends and the paranormal stuff with, the real fact that 46 people died and a bridge fell. I do also think that, aside from seeing lights over the bridge, seeing men in black on the bridge, I think for most people why they put a correlation between the bridge and the paranormal incidents is because, the abrupt halt of the paranormal activity once the bridge falls. I think that, for most people, is why they attribute the two, because when that bridge falls, the paranormal activity goes away, and I think a lot of people look at that as like, mission accomplished, or, that's the end of this, that, all of these things were here and either caused it or had a hand in it, and now that it's happened, they're gone. I think that's, from an outsider's perspective, I think that's why a lot of people attribute to it, but I do, it's a very real thing that happened. And it's also hard, though, because, I've had a lot of weird things happen in my life, in dealing with the paranormal, and at times it can be confusing to distinguish, at what point, is it a coincidence or is it not, or what parallel is there to one thing or the other. I do always try to give everything a pretty fair shake in terms of probability and possibility. So I'm not going to say that the bridge collapse was 100% not related to these events, but I'm also, going to say I'm going to lean more towards the fact that this was just an everyday kind of unfortunate tragedy, but I won't rule out 100% that was not involved because, even though there is evidence supporting why it did fall, that it was a very grounded reason, a fracture in an eye bar, due to rust and kind of traffic and weight of cars on the bridge. That is, it's evidence, but you still have to give some kind of percentile of possibility that, there was something else involved.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't rule anything out. That's the story of the paranormal.
Yeah, you just never know,
What's next for you guys at Redline Studios? What are you working on? Anything else in the paranormal realm, or some other films that might be of interest to the folks listening?
Well, after getting pneumonias and pink eye and having friends go mentally insane, we're going to take a little bit of a break from the paranormal, I think. We are, right now we're in production for a few different things. We are trying to bring more work back to this region. Our experience in West Virginia was very great. We met a lot of great people, a lot of down-to-earth, sincere, honest people. Those are the kind of people that we like to work with. Working in film and television, it's hard to work with, upstanding, honest people that you can trust, and the kind of nature of people out there is something that we respond to. So we're actually working on a few things. One is we're doing another documentary that's called Last of the Breed. It's about bluegrass musician Dave Evans. For people who've seen the Eyes of the Mothman film, the end credits is a song by Dave Evans, and we met him through the Mothman Project by licensing a song of his, and in kind of that process, we kind of found our next story. Dave Evans is kind of a pretty well-known bluegrass musician who's kind of had an interesting life. He went to prison for 10 years, and it kind of stifled his music career, and that's going to be one of our next films. People are interested in that. They can visit lastofthebreed.tv, but that'll be our next documentary. We're also actually coming back out to West Virginia to work on a musical series. People from that area will probably be familiar with a musical program called Mountain Stage. It's been one of the longest-running live radio music programs on NPR for the last 25 years, and we're going to be working with them to do a kind of documentary reality musical series. So those are two projects. In terms of the narrative world, we are also doing a action zombie movie in the next few years, as well as actually another film about West Virginia, about the last public hanging that took place in West Virginia. So we're actually we've got some things going on that should bring us back to that area.
Nice. Sounds good. How about you, Anastasia? Anything else going on?
Well, I'm working on all those same projects, producing all those same projects that Matt just talked about. So it's been busy here.
Sounds good. And where can folks pick up Eyes of the Mothman?
Anybody interested in Eyes of the Mothman can go to eyesofthemothman.com and watch trailers and also find links to places you can buy it. We are distributed through Virgil Films. That's our distributor. But also people can, it's available in some local Best Buys. If it's not in your local retailer store, you can also go to Target.com, Walmart.com, BestBuy.com, Amazon.com. Most retailers online are carrying the film, if not in your local store. Awesome.
Well, Anastasia and Matt, I can't thank you guys enough for coming on the show and really sharing your insights into the making of this movie and the amazing story of the Mothman itself. Sounds like you guys had a lot of fun making the movie, and really I'm envious of you to have the chance to go down there and dig into this and get to know the people who really have lived the Mothman story. So I highly recommend the film for folks to check out. It's really amazingly comprehensive. As Matt had said, it's quite long, but it's worth it, and you don't realize how long it is as you're going through it, because every step along the way takes you down a different avenue that is quite interesting. And you see a lot of paranormal movies, at least I do, see a lot of paranormal documentaries, and to be quite honest, a lot of them are crap. They're filmed like crap, and you can just tell they're made by amateurs. That's not the case here with this movie. This is really professionally well made, and just could easily turn up on TV on any channel out there because it's that well done. So kudos to you guys on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we worked very hard on the film. I mean, we did try to make this have as much production value. We a lot of documentarians kind of do use that as a crutch of, I'm making a documentary, this doesn't have to look good or sound good. And we really put a lot of work into having it be, both, investigative, detail-oriented, but also at the same time, very polished and, theatrical at the same time without being, theatrical in the sense of that it's not true and fact-oriented.
Oh, absolutely. The paranormal community needs more filmmakers and films like this that, give not only the story a fair shake, but present it in a way that people can really enjoy. The production values are outstanding. So, once again, highly recommend the film, and thanks once again, guys, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That does it for this edition of BOA Audio Season 6. Big thanks to Matthew Pawlowski and Anastasia Constantino for coming on the show and sharing tales from the making of Eyes of the Mothman. You can find out more about the film at www.eyesofthemothman.com. Check it out. Moving right along now, since things worked out so well last time around with skipping listener feedback to take care of in-house notes, we're going to do the same here once again, and hopefully this will be the last in-house notes at the end of the show, updating you on what has become the BOA Audio Crisis Center. As I told you last time on the program, we are switching over to our new audio host / distributor, Cyber Ears. You can find out more from them at cyberears.com, CYBEREARS.com. We are about 90% done with the big switch. And I know a lot of folks out there are probably sitting on their hands right now wondering, what the hell, man? How long does it take you to switch your archive from one site to another? Well, it takes quite a while, my friends, because we also, as I noted last week, had to take out all of the copyrighted music and replace it with the generously donated music from BOA Audio listeners. That takes time in and of itself. And then to upload all the new episodes to Cyber Ears has taken quite a while. We're talking about 175 plus episodes, folks. And I did the math on that, and it took me about 3 or 4 hours to upload about a dozen episodes, maybe 20 episodes. So we're talking quite a while here, and believe it or not, I have other things going on in my life. I work at a regular job, and I'm trying to produce BOA Audio at the same time. So all these things have to be done sort of piecemeal over the days and weeks as we roll onward. But as I said, we're about 90% done. I believe we have maybe 5 more episodes from BOA Audio Season 5 to upload. We have about 5 from BOA Audio Season 6 to fix up and upload, and we got a handful from Season 1 that somehow fell through the cracks. But we're really close to wrapping up the project now. Once that gets taken care of, fixing up the iTunes feed and fixing up the links at Banal of America really is only a matter of time. Yes, it'll probably take me a few hours to take care of that, but nowhere near the entire length of this project. It has been quite the project. It has been a massive undertaking. I want to give a big thanks to Jeremy Vaney, who has helped me out in a big way by lending his time and support during this process. I really should have done a better job of conveying the situation to all you guys out there and all the folks who visit BOA, because I've been getting emails constantly since the end of April, since the archive went down, from people wondering what the hell's going on with specific episodes. You know, they're looking for the William Zabel episode, they're looking for the Dr. Joy Pugh episode, or a whole bunch of other shows, and they're writing and asking me where the hell is BOA Audio. I write them back and let them know, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are really flummoxed at this latest turn of events. So I want to get that straightened out as soon as possible, and I don't want to give a timeline or a deadline on this, but I'm really, really hoping we can get it wrapped up either this weekend or next weekend. But there's other things on the horizon that I want to talk about as well. I kind of teased it at the beginning of the show, and that is this summer session that we are on here for BOA Audio. Now, this episode here with Matthew Pulowski and Anastasia Constantino was taped way back in March. That's the last of the old, quote-unquote, episodes you're going to hear, because right now, on June 3rd, I've already taped one episode. You'll be hearing that in a few weeks. But I can tell you that BOA Audio has locked in a slew of guests to be taped this month. I've already got 5 interviews scheduled here for June, waiting on 2 more interviews. So by the time June is all said and done, we'll have 8 new shows in the can. We're going to be welcoming back some of our old friends. You're going to be hearing from Peter Robbins. You're going to be hearing from Paul Kimball. You're going to be hearing from Marie Jones and Larry Flaxman, our old buddies there. That's going to be a laugh riot. And we've got a bunch of other folks lined up for BOA Audio that you've never heard on the program before, covering some seriously wild stuff. So for all those folks who have been sitting idly by over the last few months, gritting their teeth, chewing their fingernails, worrying about the future of BOA Audio, folks, rest assured, the rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated. BOA Audio is not going anywhere, and we've got a ton of great shows lined up for you over the course of this summer. Thank you all for your support of the program, folks. You guys are the best, and I really do appreciate all of the concerned and supportive emails I've been getting from the great BOA Audio listeners. Speaking of which, if you want to get in touch with me, that's simple. You can write to boaaudio@hotmail.com or go to binallofamerica.com, BINNALL of America.com, and click the contact button. Or you can join up at the official BOA forum, theusofe.com, theusofe.com. It is the official BOA forum, our paranormal playground. Lots of great conversations going on there about not just the world of the esoteric, but also pop culture and sports as well. Come on over and join in on the fun at theusofe.com. And of course, I'm also easy to find on Twitter and or Facebook. Just punch in Binnall, BINNALL, and you'll be able to find me there. Poke me, follow me, befriend me. It's all good. We'd love to have you as part of BOA's online circle of friends. Provided that everything is up and running on the next edition of the program, we will bring back BOA Audio listener feedback in a big way, I promise. So stay tuned for that on the next edition of the show, and keep on sending me those emails and letters. Up next, let's thank the outstanding and esteemed BOA staff: Leslie, Chiron, Regan Lee, Jovi, Tina Senna, Rochelle Hawks, Richard Thomas, Marla Pena, Bruce Pretty, Tony Morrill, our contributing cartoonist Annie Carolyn, and our webmaster Jeremy Boston. Tons of stuff up at BOA since the last time you heard me, including an all-new Paranormal Apostate by Bruce Pretty, an all-new Trickster's Realm from Regan Lee, an all-new Gray Matters from Leslie, a text interview with Jim Mars courtesy of Richard Thomas's Room 101, and an all-new edition of Fortean Ramblings by Tony Morrill. So, 5 new columns from the outstanding BOA staff. Head on over to Binnall of America and check it out. We say it week in and week out here on the program, but it is true, my friends. If you're only listening to BOA Audio and you're not reading the columns at Binnall of America, then you're only getting half the story. BOA, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. Normally, this is the part of the program where I take off my hat and pass it around to the BOA Audio listeners and ask you to make a donation to help keep the whole operation up and running. But this time around, we're going to continue with the theme of the last few weeks and ask you to make a donation to the film Beyond Best Evidence, the UFO Enigma. This is a project that BOA is working on with our buddy Paul Kimball from Red Star Films. You can find out more about that at indiegogo.com/UFO. Indiegogo, INDIEGOGO.com/UFO. Head on over to Indiegogo, find out more about Beyond Best Evidence, the UFO Enigma. Folks who make a donation can get a whole variety of bonuses and perks courtesy of their donations, so do please check that stuff out. We've only got about 2 weeks left here on the fundraising drive for Beyond Best Evidence, so that might be a good way to segue into what's coming up on the next edition of BOA Audio. Folks who have been waiting, 3 weeks for each episode are going to be happy to know that we're going to rush out the next installment of BOA Audio because our guest is going to be my good buddy Paul Kimball, and we're going to be talking about Beyond Best Evidence. We're going to be talking about the world of ufology, and we're just going to be cutting loose in general and having a jam session. So stay tuned for that on the next installment of BOA Audio. I am going to work very hard to get that one out to you a week from today, so keep your eyes peeled for the next installment of BOA Audio featuring Paul Kimball. And on that note, we close the book on another edition of BOA Audio Season 6, Big thanks once again to Matthew Pawlowski and Anastasia Constantino. Since this is the very, very, very end of this installment of BOA Audio, I feel like now I can reveal to folks that you can check out the film on Netflix. So if you've just listened to this interview and you're dying to get your hands on Eyes of the Mothman and you're a Netflix subscriber, head on over to Netflix streaming and you'll be able to watch Eyes of the Mothman right now. I didn't mention this at the beginning of the program, but I know we're reaching the hardcore BOA Audio listeners, so I wanted to give you that inside tip on how you can check out Eyes of the Mothman if you are a Netflix subscriber. Nonetheless, thanks once again to Matthew and Anastasia for coming on the show, and thanks, of course, to the amazing BOA Audio listeners. You guys are awesome. You have supported us through what has been the most tumultuous season of the program in quite some time, and your support is truly appreciated and is something that is rendering me humbled day after day and week after week. You guys are so supportive, so diligent, and so loyal. I really, really appreciate it, and I can only really back up my words with my actions, and that's kind of where we're at here heading into June. As I said moments ago here on the end cap, we've got almost 8 interviews already locked in for the month. We're not going anywhere, folks. I've been saying that at the end of the show for the past few months, and at times even I was having a hard time believing it. But I've got a second wind. I'm feeling more focused than I have in quite some time, and I'm really looking forward to producing some awesome interviews for you here over the next few weeks and months as the summer rolls on. I do it thanks to all you guys' support. So thank you once again for everything you do for this program, and thank you for making BOA Audio a part of your esoteric audio playlist. Until next time, this is Tim Banal, thanking you for listening and signing off.